Good evening. Hello, everyone. It's Rail Natter. We're it's gonna be a nice, relaxed one today. And I'm getting worse and worse at preparing these in like doing the plugging for these in advance. But they land afterwards, and all you lovely folks share them. But I need to improve that. Likewise, the audio is I've slipped back into bad habits of not keeping up with the audio as well. Sorry, everyone. It's a time. But don't worry about too much about that, because we're gonna whiz straight into the good stuff on this one. I don't want to faff around. Yes, you can see my mouse. That's fun. Let's change that to a dot. There's a reason for that. It's because we're going to be talking about maps. That's right. Oh, yeah. So, first of all, it's my face, which I do apologise for, but I suppose that is one of the things that happens on a Rail Natter episode, is you have to deal with my face. Yeah, last night was the launch for the book. It's out officially. It's out. It's in public. I stood in a large cylindrical hole and told everyone about it for a bit. This is me, but this is when we were just at the start, as people were starting to arrive and fill up the space a bit. And I ran upstairs to take a picture. So hello to everyone's backs there, but you can sort of see the little space where I shied. And this is it's an enormous cylindrical hole from 1825. It was Lewis, no spoilers, of course. The Soviet Union anthem drop. I need to get a Soviet Union anthem drop. I've only got I've got where are we? Let me get my what do I have? I don't have the Soviet Union drop, but whenever the BR logo appears, I generally come on. Why does this thing take so long to? I suppose it's loading a load of WAV files, isn't it? I suppose the thing that I use to it's going to take ages. Let's pretend it's not there. Anyway, yeah, so it was really good. Invited a few people, including 20 patron supporter folk who were there, which was very nice to see you. And yeah, so the book was launched. There's some other fun news that I'll tell you about in a minute. But what's the only thing I have is when the BR logo appears that I will go. That's the only one I've got. That's all. Anyway, So, you know what I should do at the start is as I'm waffling along, is that I should tap myself to make sure that I get going. Oh god! If you double click it, it doesn't stop. That's the thing I keep needing to remember. Anyway, those interested can just Control C, Control P the link. I don't know what Control C, Control V. The link. I don't know if they can. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So, let's get on with it. That was last night. Tonight, however, we are talking about South Yorkshire. Oh boy, are we talking about South Yorkshire. Everyone, without further ado, welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. As the In-City 225 fades away. I actually came back home this morning on an In-City 225. It was glorious. There are a couple of things we're going to talk about first. Some news. A little bit. There's an interesting little piece written in The Bite, which is quite interesting. Study finds self-driving Waymos are more expensive than taxis, take twice as long to get to destination. They're pricey. They're not very punctual. So the Waymo, which is probably in the lead on this tech, and this is, I remind you, this is not driverless. It will never be driverless. This is a vehicle that has an emergency driver remote, or in this case, sometimes still in the actual vehicle, but certainly they have a remote driver. And just when the stuff is easy, so for the 95% of driving, or even the 98% of driving, the robot does it on a grid patterned set of streets, wide, so on and so on. So, so just an interesting little study. It's well worth reading. Forbes had a look through this in reasonable detail, and it's a mess. They took twice as long as even an Uber. So, but it just feeds the fact that like the economics of this don't stack up. Even if the tech wasn't total gibberish, and I don't talk about driverless cars much, and I briefly mention them in the book, but they don't merit much discussion. But the fact of the matter is that these are. By the way, we will have a very cool guest on to talk about driverless cars and the fact they will never exist. At some point soon, I need to reach out to her, but you better believe it. So, driverless cars will never exist, and there's an interesting little study that Forbes have done that the Byte referred to here that you can go and find out. So shout out to those of you who chuck me stuff like this. That's interesting, by the way, because I hadn't spotted this one. One of the natters did spot it. So, if anyone wants to know why the US election result went the way it did, it's because we had, just like we have had with our recent budget, we've had a government in the US that's gone, no, we're doing good economics. We're going to invest in the economy, and what they did was provide a lot of capital to private companies, and the actual result was in anyone under the 50k earning bracket losing nearly 10% of their buying power in the interim. So yeah, this is not good, folks. So you can see here that the buying power of rich folks has kind of stayed the same. The buying power of middling income to higher income people, I'd say middling income people, is also sort of stayed the same. And yet, oh no, it's dropped by... oh no, sorry, forget, this isn't percentage, this is the Consumer Health Index. Yeah, basically it's just pointing out that it's not going well. The buying power of the worst off in society in the US has been diminished. Richard Fraser, yeah, the Internationale is indeed play. Yeah, no, this is bad, and we need to understand why it's bad. And the reason it's bad is because liberalism is a dead ideology, and it's destroying the planet. Once again, giving power to fascists always hams, doesn't it? Always hams. They get in power, they don't do anything actually good, and then the fascists get in. Anyway, this is a very interesting bit of work by Ashish Joshi. A reminder that it is our, it's probably Yoshi actually, a reminder that it is our modern industrial civilization's accelerating demand for materials that drives fossil fuel consumption, ecocide, and the West's imperialist assaults on the global South. In 6 recent years, we've consumed nearly as much as we did in the entire 20th century. This graph, which I'm going to flip up and make larger, is frightening. The entire 20th century, we consumed 700 billion tons of stuff. And in the 6 years from 2016 to 2021, we've consumed nearly 600 billion tons of stuff. This is frightening. I talk about this in the book. This is why we cannot just swap to cars, because we have to reduce our consumption. We have to reduce the material consumption of our species. We just do not live on a planet that you can infinitely consume on. And it's just painful. It's excruciating. And where do people think those materials come from? Where do the people think those materials come from? Because a lot of them are coming... Go back to our Theoria Francus episode, fantastic episode where we talk precisely about this in relation to lithium. Shout out to everyone who was at the launch event in the chat, by the way. Hello, everyone. So, the budget. We talked a bit about the budget last episode. Well, active travel people are also not particularly impressed by the budget. Here's Carlton Reid, well worth a follow. Lots of us going up to Blue Sky, by the way. Carlton, also one of those people. It feels like the shift is starting to happen now. The dial is the momentum is very much in Blue Sky. In Blue Sky, rightly, it's far better than Mastodon, and Threads is Facebook. So screw those guys. So Blue Sky is the right place to go, and it does feel like there's a bit of momentum at the moment. So I have now moved to cross posting on both as much as I can. Although all the fun stuff is still happening on Twitter, I'm going to be quite honest with you. Although that's slightly changing, but Blue Sky feels fairly a bit soft and safe, which isn't necessarily a good thing. But anyway, budget provides additional 100 million for cycling and walking infrastructure in 25-26. This is not the unprecedented level of funding that Transport Secretary Louise Haigh told Laura Laker was coming. Meanwhile, motorists get yet another fuel duty freeze. Climate change, anyone? Yeah, so Carlton Reid, similar commentary to me. Very much not impressed. Not so good. It just wasn't really a very good budget for transport, was it? In fact, it was a dreadful budget for transport overall. Hopeless. However, I'm not going to dunk on Louise again, because I have a good thing to say. I'm keen to find good things to say about Louise's tenure as Secretary of State for Transport, because I do think that her heart and head are both in it. So this is off the back of our episode with Jack Fifield. So Louise Haig here saying, deliberate fare dodging has no place in our railways, but innocent people shouldn't feel like a genuine state will land them in court. I've commissioned this review to help restore passengers' confidence in the system. Now, of course, as we know, the issue with the prosecutions is not necessarily because of the rules about prosecutions, although that's welcome, it's a sticking plaster. The issue is the complexity of the ticketing systems. The immense complexity of the ticketing system, and the fact that we have a railway that is very tight in capacity, and therefore we have these highly complex commercial ticketing systems to attempt to smooth demand and deal with the fact that we have extreme capacity limitations. So there are deep-rooted issues that this isn't going to tackle. However, it is positive that this is coming out of the back of the mess that Jack was pointing out. Sorry, everyone, I'm not breathing enough. There you are. You can have me drinking some water. So, Jack ought to be very proud of his story. It's made waves. It's made a difference. He should be very, very proud. Right, talking of a picture of Louise Haig walking, there's a picture of Louise Haig, who is from Sheffield. And so we're going to talk a bit about Sheffield. Shall we make my little face appear? Hello, everyone. Let's just go briefly go big face. Hello, everyone. It's me. Looking a bit like, I don't know what I'm looking like, a bit like a trawlerman right now. Knocker is saying, did you see what Haig said today in Select Committee? Apparently more active travel funding in next year's spending review and still hinting at multi-year funding settlements and a plan. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I'll believe that when I see it. Too much in the way of big promises without anything coming in behind. And we've seen that big talk, absolutely no trousers. And I don't mean that for Louise. I mean DFT. I mean the government broadly. So let me make my face small again, because you don't want to look at this thing any longer than you have to. Yeah. So the Sheffield Tribune asked me to write a piece about what infrastructure could look like, what rail infrastructure could look like on a reasonable timeline, and with a reasonable level of realisticness, within a certain, to deliver a transformative shift in public transport provision in the South Yorkshire area. And so I kind of thought, well, okay, how do we do this? Well, let's go through the route of how. Let's do this, folks. We're doing it. And by we're doing it, I mean CAD is appearing. Let's do this. Here we go. So everyone's here. Everyone's going. Everyone's absolutely getting excited. And no, that's no good. What do we want? What were the crowd going to be doing? If oh yeah, here we go. Yeah, that's right. We're going in. We're getting involved. So right. So here's the existing railing map. The area that we are talking about is the South Yorkshire Combined Authority, which is down here, which contains within it. What does it contain within it? Well, it contains within it Sheffield. There's Sheffield. There it is. There's Sheffield Midland Station. It contains within it Doncaster, which is over here. There's going to be quite a bit of scrolling in and out, by the way. If that's going to cause problems, then put it on a small screen or whatever suits you. But there probably will be a bit of dashing around because I'm fast on the mouse when it comes to CAD. I do apologise. And it includes Rotherham as well. So there's Rotherham up here. So you've got Sheffield, you've got Rotherham, you've got Doncaster, you've got Barnsley, you've got some pretty substantial built-up areas within South Yorkshire, not just focused on Sheffield. Now, the first thing that we go is, right, okay, where are current populations within this area then? So let us go for the big population dumps. We have got Sheffield, we've got Rotherham, we have got Doncaster. Okay, right, so those are the big ones. And you can see that those are actually connected-ish, although it would be beneficial if there was an improvement in the alignment here. They are kind of connected pretty well with a railway that goes in a reasonable straight line between them, right? So so we've got some infrastructure on the corridor that's broadly connecting them. We have some infrastructure that's useful. Let's drop down to the 50 to 100k population centres. So that is us adding Chesterfield, actually outside of the border of the boundary of the combined authority, by the way. But that's sometimes combined authority boundaries aren't hugely useful. Again, people can make their own decisions as to whether the call I will make in a minute is the right one. And also you have, you've got Barnsley up here. People are going to shout at me for my bad geography, but no, that is absolutely Barnsley. I'm not misremembering. There's Barnsley. And something you can say, okay, well, actually, those are connected okay, it's pretty weavy because the geography around here, by the way, is pretty hilly. But there is again a core of infrastructure connecting those bits of those urban areas. Okay, right, good. Let's see what happens when we start adding in the 10 to 50k population centres. Things start getting messier at this point. It's like, oh, okay, right. So at that point, you start having everything that sits in the valley. This is Barnsley East and Wombwell and Wath and what is that? That will be Rawmarsh, and you've got Chapeltown, or is it Chapelton? You've got Stocksbridge, and then is that Penistone? Penistone there. Yes, the one with the word penis in it. I wonder if that'll... Well, thankfully I'm not monetised anyway, so it doesn't make a difference. And then on the other side, you've got Worksop, you have got Dinnington, and you have got Swallow Nest-ish built-up area. I mean, these are the names of the built-up area designations. Dronfield, outside the Combined Authority region. Again, Worksop also outside the Combined Authority area, but that's person. So again, this starts muddying the water a bit on obvious core corridors of population density, and then dump onto the top of that, you've got your kind of the towns that attach to those. So you see there are some broad corridors here. You've got the Midland Main Line coming up through Manchester, and then you've got whatever people call it, the cross-country route or whatever the name it has, bodging through several bits of other old railway that it dives onto with two extremely irritating low-speed curves joining through, heading up to link up to Doncaster. You've got the very weavy route that heads up and links up into Leeds. So this is going up to Castleford at this end, isn't it? Yeah, there's Castleford. So that's the line going up that way. Then you've got the line coming up through Penistone that goes up to Huddersfield. These are not well-used routes, but they are routes. They exist. But there is a pattern, and you've got the disused railway that goes up to Stocksbridge along the old Great Central, heading up towards Woodhead, as famed for that reason. And then going the other direction as well, that's the route that is the old Lincolnshire, Manchester, Sheffield, Lincolnshire, that became the Great Central, heading across through here, Retford, and over the other direction. So there are some axes of infrastructure here that we could use. So then I go, okay, right, fine. What about thinking about those major centres? What are the existing stations we have? So that's okay. So we've got some existing railway stations here. Existing railway stations that I think are useful. I tell you what, let's park the stations for now. The other factor we need to think of is, right, okay, what have we been talking about for our high-speed network? So we remember our high-speed network involves, at the moment, I continue to believe Meadowhall is the right solution. I've had other people saying, but if you sent it through where Victoria used to be, that would be terrific. There just isn't the space for 400-metre platforms in that area. I just don't think you can ever make that work. And I also think that you're excluding a large amount of population by putting it further into the core of Sheffield. A lot of people will argue, well, you're decimating Sheffield city centre, to which I would argue, no, I don't believe that is the case. You have lots of built-up areas that have extremely high-density metro connections to a hub station. But again, it's for the region to decide. Put it to referendum. Let the region decide on that, but do put the work in to understand what the differences would look like. And for what it's worth, I will have a go at seeing if you could put something through Victoria. But as we'll talk about, if you put something through Victoria, it then makes it extremely hard to do something useful from a suburban capacity perspective on that corridor. So here's our nominal high speed network coming through. So we've got that in the background. We've got to kind of bear that in mind, that we've got our perspective, ethical mobility for engineering, ethical engineering for mobility, Network 2050 kind of route here that we've done in previous rail natters going through there. So we've got that coming through. So bear that in mind. Now, if we then go back here and start putting, so let's put some stations up. So we've got some stations. We've got the existing state, and I'm going to put some. What I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to not put the stations up. I'm going to just say, what are people's thoughts? Pretty please, can you stick the high speed? Is anyone else getting that rattle? Is there a loose circuit in my lovely pod mic? I hope not. I'm getting a little bit of feedback there. Audio nerds tell me. Anyway, so yeah, send your thoughts. Let's pause for a minute and just with all this data that we've just dumped in, and there's not a huge amount of data there. So there's a couple of things at play. We've got the connectivity into the intercity network via our future high-speed line. You've got the patterns of urban development, the built-up areas here with the kind of the densest and the largest in the lighter colour, the darker or the smaller population centres. You've got the dark grey here showing us the existing infrastructure corridors of rail that we have. The trams aren't on there, but the trams are kind of just a bus, their local connectivity. We're talking about mass capability, not bus capability at this point. Trams are a low-level mass transit. They are rail, they're great, they're useful, but they're... anyway, so here is the mess. A lot of people... Yeah, you know what? Let's do a quick poll, actually, while I'm here, because I'm genuinely interested. Start a poll. Let's go with Meadow Hall, Victoria, and other, question mark? There we go. Let's just do that little poll. Start poll. Let's see what people think. Let's actually see what people think, whether they think Meadow Hall, Victoria, or other for the high-speed connection. You know where the high-speed hub station should be for South Yorkshire. So far, Meadow Hall takes it. So let's go through. I think Meadow Hall is the right decision, much like Towton for Derby and Nottingham. Yeah, agreed, Reinhard. That's my view. Katie agrees as well. Nucker agrees. Referenda bad, be like Germany, ban them. Rob F says, potentially dumb question. No, it's not a dumb question. Why would they need a 400-metre platform? Half that length seems acceptable. Maybe I'm wrong. So the high-speed 2 platforms are 400 metres long because the trains are 400 metres long. So it's a reasonable specification, and every station built for our high-speed network should be 400 metres long, allowing for that potential to run those long trains, particularly if we find ourselves in a situation where actually capacity is at a premium. If we remind ourselves very, very briefly what that overall GB network looks like, so we've got the connectivity on the existing high-speed line there coming up as well. If we remind ourselves what that overall connectivity looks like, there are quite a few. In fact, very briefly, I'll whiz in here and shove the frequencies on as well. There are pretty high frequencies in some of those areas, and so there's a bit of a premium on what trains could go where. So actually, in some instances, you might be relying on, it'd be valuable not to be going for the 200-metre trains, which are shorter than the current trains, by the way. Current trains are about 250, 260 metres long. So 400-metre train is a good use of a path. Let's put it that way. So it's right to have a 400-metre long station, and that's the design that HS2 is rightly pursuing. It's not a dumb question. It's a great question, Rob. Tom's saying, I don't know enough about Yorkshire's rail infrastructure to be able to answer that question. That's quite reasonable. Thomas Atkin, Withers, agnostic on Meadow Hall, would rather it serve Midland, but I'll take anything at this point. Yeah, well, yeah, quite. So it's interesting, isn't it? Midlands... The reason that Midland is very difficult is because you obliterate that regional connectivity, and we'll get into what that looks like and why it's important, what the value of keeping and retaining the existing infrastructure completely free of intercity traffic is, and why that's important. Let's go through it. Should we briefly go big face again? So there's a few good questions coming through. Let's see. Tom Smith, Meadow Hall with some reservations. Yeah, I'm under no illusions that it's perfect. You could not go for Meadow Hall without also absolutely saying, and this is the strategy within which it will fit, so that everyone understands. I think the regional referenda on specific, well laid out questions like this, that actually, like, evidence isn't the only part, and I talked about this in the book launch yesterday. Evidence isn't the only part of the story, and actually, if you want buy-in from the population, so they go, you know what, we collectively all decided this. I don't think a referendum's a bad idea on If you're honest, like, well, it's kind of, let's understand what everyone in the South Yorkshire Combined Authority and anyone who might be part of a wider transport system thinks about anyone within what will be believed to be the catchment of a South Yorkshire station, wherever it ends up being. I think it'd be quite a good thing actually to take that to referendum and go, okay, we can make it work here. This is a likely cost. These are the likely challenges, but these are these are clearly some benefits. And then likewise, do the same thing. So work up the two options to a reasonable level of detail. Spend whatever, spend £250,000 on each option on consultancy and really work out exactly what it's going to cost, what the implications might be, a decent understanding of what the potential engineering challenges might be, but lay them out and sort of go, these are the options, we're going to consult on these, but actually let's, it's a non-binding referendum, but it would be genuinely interesting to poll, to go out and poll the population. And I actually think doing a referendum on things like that, going to the public and going, do you think it should be Victoria? Do you think it should be Meadowhall? Or do you think it should be somewhere else? I think there should be another option, just like our little poll here. Is a useful way to re-engage people in democracy and make them feel like some of their involvement actually is meaningful and beneficial. So anyway, so that's all that. There we go. Let's go down. What other thoughts? Might be possible to provide a dedicated corridor, dedicated platforms via Sheffield Midland. I honestly don't think so. I just don't think you can achieve it. I don't think you can, as an engineer and going through there, I don't think it's possible to achieve a Midland station. It'd be interesting to try and work something up, but I think the level of impact you would have on the city centre core, it'd be extremely, extremely difficult. Meadowhall, but at a minimum double the tram frequency. Oh, Daniel Smith, forget trams. We're gonna blast the trams out the water in a minute. For a referendum, there needs to be clear public information beforehand rather than the 2016. Yeah, the thing about the 2016 referendum is it was bullshit versus bullshit. Like both sides were just speaking nonsense. The thing about something like this that's material is that you can have the same party is presenting the information. So you might have people lobbying for either, but in terms of the body that actually presents the information, they will present both as fairly and as but try and get as good a solution in either on the basis that one of them might win. So you get as good a solution in either and see what people think. I think it's an interesting point to consider. Biggest concern with the referendum is that bad actors be putting car-centric options in for balance. No, there would be no. So there would be a pre-agreed set of options of what actually works. So I think the only options really on the table would be Meadowhall and Victoria. Actually, yeah, maybe the other option isn't a good idea. So maybe you do just say Victoria and Meadowhall as the two options. I don't think there is another viable option, really. But we'll get into why this is important. Let's keep going down through. I assume people would get to the city centre on the Crossrail. It's about to be magically revealed to us. Correctamundo. Yes, right, so fine. Referendum rather than consultation. Yeah, well, yeah, because consultation doesn't necessarily... The thing about if there's a referendum, people who are unhappy about it but didn't vote... they're kind of like, well, you had a chance to have your voice heard and you didn't. People who did a referendum and it goes the other way and see that there's a majority going the other way, hopefully we'll get some consolation that actually that their friends and family and colleagues and neighbours have a different view and could feel okay about that. I think there is a place for referenda here, I think, honestly. Aidan G, would you have Meadowhall be an all-stop station for all services running the current network, as would GBR and Crossrail at Old Oak Common? Yes. So it would be an all-stop station for the high-speed network, and it would be an all-stop station for the... so I would run HS2 differently. I would not have the complex skip-stop arrangement. I would be running everything conveyor belting. And yes, that would mean ever so slightly longer journey times, but it would encourage improvements to the infrastructure further to get the speeds up and the journey times down. But it would also mean that you get a more simple timetable, because I think it's a bit of a nightmare to have all these complicated patterns of trains going in all directions. I think it should be, for the most part, if you're stood at that station, if you're stood at this station here in Meadowhall, going, there's a train coming and south facing, they're all going. You've already got options. By what we've got here, it is already complicated by the geographical nature, but we shouldn't then add complexity with skip stops. It should be, if it's going along that line, it stops at every station. And likewise, the thing we're about to have revealed to us, which, should we get on with it? Should we do it? Sheffield is a city of 500,000. We bloody deserve all services. Thomas, you have more than 500,000. You have a solid whack of population in the combined authority. I don't remind myself what the population is actually. South Yorkshire Combined Authority population. There we go. It is 1.5 million people. 1.5 million people, a city region well worthy of a full metro system. So, yeah, here we go. Right, so, Ben Rattigan rightly pointing out that consultations rarely get beyond special interest groups, whereas a referendum that goes to the general public, by its very nature, would have to be engaged with, because everyone could vote. There'd be a vested interest, therefore, in the parties to give the right information out and make a clear, easy choice. Let's get on with this, shall we? So I'm going to hide. I'm going to hide our towns for a little bit, and I'm going to put on all of our stations for now. Or is that annoying? Let me just do this and this. You know what? No, we'll come back through the lines and we'll talk about this in a minute. But I'm going to go with right. So how did I do this? The first thing I did was I looked at our existing stations, and we've got existing kind of corridors, and I kind of follow it that. Well, you know what? Maybe this is the right time to do this and go. Here we go. Here's the map. Oh, you can't see me. Good, thank you. Yes, small face is back. No, small face. Here we are. So let's do the map. So I've done some wiggling around. You missed all that, but I'm here. I've not screwed it up for too long. I always do big face for too long. So here we are. Here's the map, right? So we have 3 lines that have, in some cases, some branches, and I will go through and try and justify each of them to some reasonable level that you're all happy with. But here is the map. So we have the Midland line, which will run from primarily Doncaster through to Chesterfield, going through the Meadowhall Interchange complex, and through several stations, of which some don't exist yet. We'll talk about those in a minute. And some station with an interchange at what I'm calling Cutler's Gate, which is Victoria, but I kind of want to move past calling it Victoria. So we're calling it Cutler's Gate because I think it's cool to talk about Cutlers because, steel, stainless steel. Sheffield Midland, Healy, Millhouses, Dore and Totley. What are those? Oh, we'll get to those as well. But Dore and Totley, that'll need more reconstruction. And then through Dromfield, and then some other places that aren't exchange stations through to Chesterfield. So, and then connections, by the way, at the fringes of these connections to regional services. So that's the Midland line because it runs mostly on the former Midland network. There's enough stations called Victoria as it is, absolutely. So the central line, as we will call it, because it uses lots of the former Great Central infrastructure. This is the line that will run from Worksop in the east and Renishaw in the south as 2 branches, meeting through Woodhouse and coming up through into our interchange station at Cutler's Gate, which will be a big complex, by the way. Arguably, it will be the main way to get into the city centre, because if there's a lot of development around there, you can pull the CBD in that direction as well. There's some value to doing that. So through Cutler's Gate and then up the line to Stocksbridge, of which none of these stations currently exist, of course. But this provides you with a lot of opportunities of new development. And we'll get into the logic, a little bit of the logic about how I... we'll get to the Rotherham tram train, yeah. But yes, Michael C. Is the answer to that. The tram train can get yeeted onto roads, and because this infrastructure is much higher capacity and much more useful as a result. And then the last line is the Valleys line, because it goes between 2 valleys, which I thought was quite nice, if I'm going to name it that way. So you have running from the north, from Penistone, down through Barnsley. So Penistone is where there would be a regional service or a West Yorkshire service. I'm not quite sure what that looks like because I've not done this work yet for West Yorkshire. But there'd be a shuttle service coming down from Huddersfield. So this is the way I would do it, I think, is that you'd have a fringe, rather than running up to Huddersfield, you'd have a shuttling service that comes down from Huddersfield. And this, in a way, it helps mean that this can be regionally run. As in, it can be administered as a combined authority thing rather than... So in a way, I know that some people be like, well, what, you're splitting geographies there, but actually I think there's some value in having an interfacing station, a bit like Merseyrail do now, where you've got Merseyrail ends and then the northern services continue. Be a bit like that at Penistone, and then at Barnsley Interchange the same for the services for A8. So you'd have West Yorkshire services coming into Barnsley Interchange from the other direction, I would guess, but I haven't gone into the detail of that. So those coming down from Penistone through Barnsley, Elsecar into Meadowhall Interchange. And then through the very busy core to Dore and Totley, and then up to Hope. And I think there's some logic to actually then terminating at Hope, again, with then Greater Manchester services potentially coming the other direction, if we're going to think about that. But again, so I would have my interface in that way, with the potential that you might... So ideally, this would all be on segregated infrastructure. We'll get to that in a minute when we go back to the maps. But I think on the Hope Valley line that would be difficult given the mixture of freight, critical freight corridor, and other stuff. So there's work to. This is an imperfect system, and it is suburban rail rather than dedicated. It's not a metro system, although you could get very close to it being a metro system in lots of ways with with certainly improved stock signalling and electrification throughout. You could really get close to it, ticking off the box of metro, other than the fact that it wouldn't be a fully segregated system in various places. So that's the kind of connection map, and so you get this mix of, so you get Cutler's Gate acts as the kind of connection of everything, all of them going through that area. Meadowhall Interchange then has two of the lines, the key lines going through it, and then you have a bit of a gap to. So then Sheffield Midland is quite close to Cutler's Gate, and then so you kind of have this kind of core section here, which would be very high capacity. Is this like the Overground or Merseyrail? More like Merseyrail, to be honest. So there we go. So there's a bit of chat coming through. What else have we got here? Waverley, Neepsend, Stockbridge. Yeah, it is very Edinburgh. Les Chegwin. Yeah, I don't know what. It's interesting. There are quite a lot of parallels, but I don't know. Yeah. Strongly agree that Renishaw should be joined to Chesterfield. So. Yes, this is a thing that we'll come to this in a minute. This is a thing that having done this, these things always evolve and move, particularly when it's just me. I see quite a bit of merit in the connection going down to Chesterfield. I haven't done that for this setup, but that doesn't mean that this isn't. I'm not saying this is a perfect arrangement, and this iteration with us lot and with the people would improve it further. I'll go into my logic as to why I didn't do it the first hand, but let's go back to the maps, shall we? So. We have I'm going to get rid of the background stuff because you can sort of see what was going on. If I'd been clever with levels, I'd have like just looked at the separate lines. So let's look in the first instance at the. What I need to do is actually bring this up here, so I have the lines in front of me. That's the right thing to do. Yeah, here we go. So let's look firstly at the Midland line. So the Midland line. Let's go up to Doncaster up here. So at Doncaster, you would. What's the sort of things you'd be doing? Well, you'd be setting up at least 2 dedicated platforms, and you'd be building the infrastructure such that they are entirely segregated, split off from the other infrastructure entirely. So you have them running in such a way, usefully actually, the track layout here allows it. You'd have them running in such a way that they run completely separate from the East Coast main line, so they just don't even cross, don't even bother with it. So they'd come in, dedicated platforms, run out. We'll get to the potential news stations in a minute, but they run down through. Maybe let's crack the news stations up as well. So I'll briefly talk about news stations. So the way I done news stations is a mixture of things. Firstly, I think I gave 2-kilometer spacing, so where I had a large spacing between stations. I was like, well, perhaps there ought to be a station here. Is there an opportunity for development? So that's kind of led some of the thinking, but also not wanting to have too high a frequency, but also understanding that if you've got a bit of a drumbeat of station stops, it's quite good from an operational perspective, and a train planning perspective, and so on. But it also is good to have that drumbeat and the split about 2 kilometers between these for a high capacity system, because that gives you a decent. It gives you about a 1 kilometer, never more than about 1 kilometer walk from a station. So that's kind of an important factor in this to make sure that you're absolutely grabbing the maximum saturation. Right, save some of your regional connectivity questions for Sheffield Midland, because my response to that is possibly, but also possible. Actually, my response to it is read the piece, because I say actually, ideally, the connections from Sheffield Midland would be wound down, and Sheffield Midland would see just an incredibly high capacity system running through, but it wouldn't need to, because this is a mixed system. It can run as a mixed system based on what I'm talking about. So anyway, what I will put on as well is, let's get the centre lines on as well, so we can see our little centre lines. So new stations at Bolby and Warmsworth. Conisborough is already a station. There's already that exists. I think it'd be good to put a station at, again, looking at the spacings here, I think Dearne Valley would benefit from a station here, providing access into some of the facilities here and out into both leisure and also residential connectivity. Now, what I do that potentially is interesting here is that I propose to retain the split in two lines and not actually do what the current the kind of connecting services do, which is run through Mexborough Curve and straight in through Swinton, is actually to keep the services on the Rotherham, the low line through Kilnhurst, again allowing a station at Kilnhurst, but essentially providing additional connectivity. So you get a bit of extra connectivity, bit of extra saturation, and also potential for further housing development and urban development to create that additional line. And also you're maximising capacity by keeping the lines split as well. Presumably the Doncaster avoiding line would become disused under this plan as well. Not necessarily, because there's still a lot of freight that runs through here. So another caveat to this is that you would have to work very hard to ensure that the delivery of this would work with freight. Now, if you have a high frequency system, then actually you can skip a train. If you've got trains that are running, and we'll have a look at this at the moment on here, I've got 5 trains per hour as a nominal sort of service pattern, and you'll see why, because it means that things get pretty intensive as you get further down. If you've got 5 trains an hour, then firstly you can fit freight in amongst that if you have suitably robust signalling without actually hitting that at all. But also, if you've got 5 trains an hour and you have 2 or 3 freight trains a day of a certain type that use a certain section, actually it's more than that along this path, but say you'd have that, then dropping 1 train an hour, so it's on the odd hour here and there, it's 4 trains an hour, is not the end of the world if people have only got to wait another 5 minutes or so. So that's key. So they come in, link up kind of north of Aldwark, and at which point they are running through what would be a core through Rotherham Central. So again, at this point, what would kind of be, it wouldn't be new infrastructure, basically be diverting off the main route again, because the main route comes over the top and skips Rotherham Central. But I don't want to do that. I want these trains to go through Rotherham Central. I want Rotherham Central to be served by the high density services. So Thomas, you're right. It would be nice to go to Addick, because Addick is, it's worth saying, if I just quickly pop these up, there is population up. It could be to Addick, or it could be to the population in the other direction. Doncaster is one lump here, but actually there is other bits of Doncaster that could benefit from the 2 kilometres worth of station. The trouble is you're crossing the East Coast Main Line, and I think the right thing to do is not actually to cross the East Coast Main Line. You want to treat these major cores, even if it's the regional line, as HS2 will render East Coast Main Line. It's still better to keep the East Coast Main Line as a bit of a splitting off point, unless you do some very heavy civil engineering, which I'm not ruling out, but I suggest you don't necessarily need it at this point. So continuing down on our little line, you through Rotherham Central, a new station at Jordan for existing development and also the potential for future development as well, because there's a lot of brownfield around here. And then you come through to Meadowhall. So here's Meadowhall. So you'd have the big Meadowhall station, kind of HS2 station, and then the existing Meadowhall station, exists. That station's there, as is quite a lot of the heavy infrastructure feeding it. So you have that interchange station, a 4-platform Meadowhall station. It needs some upgrading, and obviously all of it gets wired. Wired underground station at Doncaster, not necessarily completely bonkers. Keep going through, so you can see there's a bit of spacing here about what you do. Actually, do you put 2 stations in here and push what I've called Atlas Station a bit further south? Maybe, because this is very much just an enormous amount of development potential. But it should be fed by tram and bus to do some of that feeding anyway. So, and part of the reason I didn't put 2 stations in there is because I want as quick a journey time between Meadowhall and Sheffield Midland and Cutler's Gate as possible. So there's a little bit of a logic to that. So here, this would go down. So people are saying, Thomas is saying, assuming the yellow route tram would connect the 2 Meadowhall stations since it's near Tinsley Meadowhall South. I mean, these would have a people mover between them probably, because it would be a massive, and to be honest, 400 metres means these would be very close to each other. I suggest they'd be within very easy walking distance. So, we continue. Atlas to this interchange at Cutler's Gate, which is broadly where where Victoria Station used to be, the Great Central Station used to be, over to Woodhead, the Sheffield-facing station, the Manchester-facing station. So this would be redeveloped as a major sort of transport interchange, and you should orient your bus network into meeting here as well, and also do some roads reprioritization to feed and widen and tie into the canals, so you end up pulling the CBD over and developing all this dump to being more mixed residential, commercial, and light industrial. So you can have a really nice mixed-use space, a bit like Camden. You've got canals, you've got all the ingredients to really turn this into somewhere that's a pretty cool space, and Cutler's Gate would be the access to that. That's my view. That's my spatial viewing. There's currently a Network Rail office there, which Simon's been to. Hello, Simon, by the way. Hope you're feeling better. Sheffield Nordkreuz, Harry Harrison. Yeah, you could call it that, couldn't you? So that is what you do. That then, of course, it would not. People might see this as diminishing Sheffield city centre. I did not see it that way. Sheffield's a big city. You just you just make the city centre bigger, particularly if you've got the canals up here. There's so much opportunity there. London has lots of city centres. So do so does Manchester. So do the other cities have multiple major city centres, and actually, I think that you don't diminish. Just as I see it, and others may disagree, but the evidence is kind of on my side on this one. But I think also the story can be too, is that you're not diminishing the part of the Sheffield that's around Sheffield Midland. You improve that, and you get another bit of city centre, so you get another bit of if you want to go neolib, you get another bit of economic extraction, economic uplift, and economic value, but also in an area that potentially is cool to start fresh. Retaining as much industrial heritage as you can, because it looks good when you do that. Camden Market in that area is a good example of what that looks like, as is Teardrops at and King's Cross, King's Cross redevelopment, another model for what this can look like. Car-free and spectacular. It is achievable. This is what people should do. So you're just making more city centre. This is good. So that's why I think it's a good idea to do this. It does not diminish Sheffield Midland, but you also have an immensely high-capacity core. 12 trains an hour running down through between Meadowhall and Sheffield Midland. So you really max on trains running kind of along that route. And so Sheffield Midland being larger, I would use some of that footprint for turnback. So even if it does end up just being a dedicated through station on a suburban, it's kind of not quite metro system, use the footprint to have turn back options and possibly even stabling options. So there are things you could then do. And Gareth is absolutely right. Like, having the interchange away from the city centre actually spreads the load a bit on the infrastructure and allows the infrastructure to be better utilised. And as you go south, it's ridiculous there are not intermediate stations along this bit of railway. So I've chosen stations, I think, a sensible station locations at what is now Healy and Millhouses. There were existing stations, I think, nominally in those two locations as well, but we should not be bound by where the former stations were. Then Doran Totley becomes a 4-platform interchange from what they've just spent a lot of money on making it 2 platforms. Well, more work to be done, turn it into a 4-platform interchange, splitting out onto what is our Valleys route that goes in that direction. And then we continue stations at Dronfield, new station at Unston, and new station at Whittington, and then arriving into Chesterfield. So, and this is where we can see the other line. So that is that's the Midland line. There's a branch that I want to talk about briefly, which is the branch up to Thurnscoe via Goldthorpe, Bolton upon Dearne. That's a route that's currently used. The York train uses that, actually. And the York train uses that. But again, it's a situation of, I think the right thing to do is to run the services as a meeting point from the South Yorkshire services would terminate Thurnscoe. The West Yorkshire services would also terminate there, and you'd essentially, a bit like the Merseyrail back-to-back. So, Unston. People are asking me about Unston. People are like, what's going on at Unston? There is a lot of potential for housing development at Unston, I think. There's potential for development. So that some of these stations, there's not much around, and you'll certainly see that on the Stocksbridge branch. When we get to talking about the central line, you'll see there's a lot of gap. There are some areas where I put a station, there's nothing there. You don't need to build the station immediately, but you should absolutely reserve it as being a potential position for a station if it's decided that later development would happen. So I'm not saying that Unston would be open with the whole thing. The good thing about my plans, and we'll talk about cost in a minute, the good thing about my plans is that you don't have to do all of it at once. You can start with kind of like, how do we just rearrange the existing trains, the crappy diesels we have, and start shaping the patterns of services a bit like this already. We can do some of this right now, even before we've done electrification. Then you can start electrifying bits. Then you can go, station here, station there. It's possible to do that. But absolutely, Gareth made the reference there to Metroland. Yes, we want to urbanise. We want to bring populations out of rural areas and into urban areas, not because I want to decimate rural areas, but because it's the most environmentally friendly way to live is in an urban area where you can access everything. using public transport where we can build that density. I'm afraid the right thing to do is to densify urban areas. That's a good thing. And we have the opportunity to really densify. Look at all the industrial land, of which a lot of it is not hugely well used. Plenty of it still is. And you know what's great about the modern era? Is that you can mix industrial and residential and commercial, and it can work great. London, perfect example of that now. With clean modern industry, you can kind of mix them, and that's fine. So that's the middle line. So let's now talk about the central line. And for that, we're going to go out to Worksop, which is a bit beyond, admittedly, the limits of the combined authority. But I think it's reasonable to have that, because if you run to Worksop, you're getting exchange onto the Robin Hood line, and you're heading down to Mansfield and Nottingham, and you're getting connection into the East Midlands metro system, which we will talk about in a future episode. Worksop also gives you the connections across to the east as well. So there's a lot of value in having, I think, an interchange at Worksop, and there's also plenty of space for it. Worksop's a nice big station footprint. There's loads of space for you to have dedicated two track terminal electric platforms. People are asking random questions about East Coast. Why doesn't Peterborough get high-speed rail? Because Peterborough has extremely good connections down into London via Great Northern, and it would still retain decent fast connections, although not high speed, on its on the East Coast Main Line via all stopping regional services. So I don't think, and also yes, Peterborough is part of an urban connectivity with Cambridge as well, and it benefits from that, and you can kind of maximise the connections in that direction. But it doesn't need to be high speed. Yes, there's a gap in the high-speed network over there, but this isn't a particularly populous part of the country. That's kind of why. So sorry, everyone at Peterborough. Yes, you live your train set is like a modern railway. Right, so Air and others are asking. Let's start. So Worksop, Shire Oaks, existing stations, Clifton Park and Bridge, both existing station. New station at Wales, not that one, with very much development potential here. There's all sorts of potential capacity for development here, as well as a large urban area that has no connection to the railway. So there's a massive, horrible road in the way, so that there'd need to be quite a bit of realm works to connect that up. But Wales is the right place for a station. And then before we reach Woodhouse, we have our branch. So let's now go down to the bottom of the branch here, which is the branch that runs. So you get a new station at Bayton, then Southall, Killamarsh. Forgive me if any pronunciations I'm doing aren't the correct South Yorkshire pronunciations, but people can shout at me. And then Renishaw. Now, from an operational perspective, you can understand why I've set this up the way I have. However, it's partly related to the fact that this is outside of the combined authority, but it's a good example of where there's a slight operational conflict of what that should look like. But actually, because we put Chesterfield as being here, then actually, you know what, it probably is the right thing to connect up through. So with the benefit of hindsight from this is what I presented in the article, but actually having a station. So what we got, if we quickly pop a 2 kilometer radius here. So if we'd have 2,000, we'd have a station like there, and so the junction here. Actually, it's also interestingly probably some benefit in having a junction station. So a junction station, and so you'd probably have a station. Well, that's 1 kilometer. 2 kilometers. Actually, let's move this to here, and then let's also copy this from here to here. So let's have a look. So we probably have a station. You probably might at this point decide that you want a junction station of some kind, which you could do, and there's car parks and all sorts of space for that to happen there. Actually, so that potentially do that there. Station up here. This looks like it could be a former station area, but anyway, certainly there's some space for a station around here to serve the populations here. Not much in the way of population, but there absolutely is some population and some development space for what is that? It's depot stuff. Okay. So another station here, and then also an enormous amount of development. So you're talking like massive development potential. Yeah, it's sold. You've sold me. I'm sold. Barrow Hill. Of course, it's Barrow Hill, isn't it? Where's the roundhouse? No. Anyway, certainly potential for station there. and a huge amount of development, brownfield development potential. Then, and also serving the railway stuff. Another station up here, serving some of the brownfield land here for potential development. You don't have to put the station there if you don't want it, if people don't agree. Yes, it is Barrow Hill. Of course it's Barrow Hill. It's got the front end of a Class 93 in it, which I need to go and visit, even though it's very dusty. And then it connects into Renishaw. So yeah, no, I'm sold on it. I didn't put this in my original piece because I thought operationally it's a bit scrappy, but actually no, I'm sold on it. So out of Chesterfield, you get decent connectivity northwards. You get some options, and you can connect into Chesterfield if you live here, because it makes no sense to seal that off. So no, I'm fully sold on it. Fully sold on it. Staveley area has a lot of planned development, so that makes sense. So there we go. So yeah, I think we can adapt that part of the plan and actually treat it as a separate line for sure. And here you'd run them on the 4-track section, so they're fully segregated. You can run operationally, you'd have them segregated. It's useful to have lines being kind of segregated. But yeah, I'm up for that. So I'm going to leave those bubbles in as a reminder to myself, because this is my working. Spoiler alert, there's other stuff going on down here. For example, if I do this, oh, what's all that? So yeah, like I will very much kind of add that in and update that accordingly, because this is my big plan map of what a potential whole UK, all of the urban area metro / suburban rail systems could and should look like. Eventually I'll get to places like Glasgow, but to be honest, Glasgow has a very good system. Actually, funny, Glasgow's next, because I'm writing a piece on Glasgow. Anyway, right, so the Central Line. So we've got our branch. So accepting the changes we made, then we have those two branches merge, so you end up with now an 8 train per hour core through Woodhouse, new station at Waverley. Darnell has a station. We go into our lovely interchange at Cutler's Gate. Let's quickly zoom in on Waverley. You can see why that needs a station there, is because there's just been an enormous amount of development here. And I hope they plan to put a bloody station there no matter what. Anyway, so Cutler's Gate, then the fun stuff starts, right? The fun stuff. The junction station is Lockford Road. Cool. Yeah, do send in the Discord what you think the station should be called, by the way. Do that for those ones that we've just talked about. Nice. So, new station at Neep's End. So, wherever it happens to be, I think there is a good spot. Again, you've got canal, you've got potential for development. That's not a canal, sorry, that's a shadow. But you do have canal further over. So, you've got the potential for... It's the canalised river, sorry. In any case, you've got the potential for riverside development. You've got a lot of brownfield. You've got a lot of potential to create a nice space there. Excellent place for station, and also you're serving the industrial space as well. Next station up the line is Wadsley Bridge. Again, here broadly where there was a station. I think the station was maybe a bit further south, but again, huge population that you're tapping into here. Just an enormous population here. At this point I say, well, you don't have to, but you could step it down. You could have turn back at Wadsley Bridge and then have 4 trains an hour, so you've got to Otter Bridge, obvious candidate for a station. But then things get a bit more fun. So up at Bitholmes, well, there's nothing here. There is nothing, but there's quite a lot of leisure. And there is development potential as well for, even if it's a small development, even if it's a small commercial development, like an eco development, like a little like commercial eco development that people might be interested in, like a little eco business area, that sort of thing. But certainly the leisure connectivity is key at this point. And then you work your way up. Obviously, you have a station at Deepcar, and then Stocksbridge itself, and connecting through the works, and everything connecting to it. All the potential of that is not just in the immediate passenger connectivity to the urban areas, but then you're reaching your way up into the valleys that allows a lot of useful leisure connectivity as well. So Worsley Bridge will be good for matches at Sheffield Wednesday. Oh yeah, I guess it would. There it would be. So get that bus sorted. There's the stadium. Very nice. So that's the Central Line. And yes, so we were with accepting that it would have some updates to connect down to Chesterfield. That's the Central Line. Do send your thoughts. I think for Don Valley Rail there was a plan for a station near Hillsborough College. Oh, quite possibly. So it might be that there are other, there might be other preferences, so that's not a college, that's a farm. But the potential for other kind of options of another intermediate station depending on development plans. I did have a look at some of the spatial planning for this area, but to be honest, as with York, lots of these places have not published their local plan, so it's very difficult to understand what the spatial planning requirements are for where stations would be good. But you know what? That's fine. These are not. I'm not saying this must be where a station is. I'm not that kind of person. I'm saying there's probably a good idea to have a station in this area, and the local plan would actually define where that ought to go. Within. Well, no, the local plan should define where that go, and then the engineering will come in to put that station where the people need it to be. And if there are some compromises that make the engineering substantially easier for minimal loss of amenity, then that's something that can be negotiated. But start with where the station should be, not where is there a straight track or where is this former station, because those aren't the right ways to know where a station ought to be nowadays. Just like it wasn't, it doesn't necessarily mean if the railway was closed, it doesn't necessarily mean it should be reopened. It's kind of true with stations as well. Like often a station ought to be located a little bit in it, even if it's nominally where the former station was. It may benefit from being moved to better match into the current spatial planning and such and such. Warncliffe Crags is beautiful in that bit Olms area. It is, and so any station that was be here would have to be sensitive to that point. But areas that are beautiful, if we can get people there not by car, that's a good thing. So, so if we can have a station, I think it'd be a good thing to have a station serving that area. The crags are very beautiful through here, actually. It's a nice area. So, that's the central line. Do send your thoughts. Do you think railways should be used as a way to develop brand new towns and neighbourhoods? B Crossing asks. I absolutely do. In the way of Metroland. Do I think that should be happening everywhere where the railway passes through? No, I think that you can have a metro system that runs through a beautiful rural unpopulated area. If it then is whizzing through to a more densely populated area again, I think that's absolutely fine. So long as you're not running the thing for too long, but also see the next line. So if we're going to then talk about the Valleys line, let's head up to Penistone. And you can see that this one's a bit more weavy. And to be honest, weavy is tricky because of the fact that you've got the slower journey times mean that you need more rolling stock and staff to serve the line, and so it becomes more operationally challenging as well as more costly. In resources, forget money, but in resources it becomes more costly. So there would absolutely be benefits to, for example, doing some corner chopping. So if there's anywhere where there's a particular sawtooth in speeds, then there are benefits to chopping out those funny corners. If there are funny, weird transition things or areas where you could slacken curves and get higher speeds, then that work should happen, particularly on the Valleys line at the northern end where you've got it's a bit of a mess. So Penistone, lol. Wait a minute, I've got a thing for that. Say that again, sorry. Penistone. So Penistone, you can run along here and go through Silkstone Common, Dodworth, existing stations these are, and then into Barnsley Interchange. Do tell me, by the way, if you're getting more mic. I'm getting mic rattling my, but it might just be feedback in my earphones. So Barnsley Interchange, which is where you'd have the connection going up to West Yorkshire, and you can see the Combined Authority boundary. You can also see that there are several built-up areas out here, and this is where, there are compromises in infrastructure, and that actually it'd be good for South Yorkshire to run the services to have an additional branch that comes up this way, maybe, and maybe you do end up doing that. But equally, perhaps it's a situation where you have the shuttle being run by the West Yorkshire that comes into Barnsley Interchange because it allows a neater, linear operation. There's a lot to be said for linear, simple operation. A lot to be said. So, Thomas rightly pointing out, it'd be nice to have a North Barnsley station for intertown connections. I agree, and I don't think that they wouldn't exist. My gut feeling is that it might be most useful, and I haven't looked at the West Yorkshire map and how I would make those lines work, but it might be that it makes most sense to actually terminate the West Yorkshire stuff in Barnsley Interchange, so you do get the stations in North Barnsley, in those areas, but that they're kind of branded as West Yorkshire rather than South Yorkshire, even though they're in the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. Does that make some sense? That's it. So there's lots of people talking about cross-country services. No, we don't have to worry about cross-country services because those will be in HS2. For the regional stuff, well, my preference would be that we wind down the regional stuff and we ramp up the urban networks, but that's not fully going to happen in this area. But once you build this out, the number of services that you haven't swallowed into this suburban system drops very close to zero. The only things that are retained are services from Sheffield to Manchester, services from Sheffield to the East Midlands, and services and services from Sheffield to the up to kind of like York and across to, well, no, even those, because again the York ones, I think the York ones would be served by HS2, so you've got rid of those. The East Midlands one served by HS2, you've got rid of those, you don't need those. the line to Manchester, well, you've got rid of those because my view is that you have the connection straight across to Manchester with high speed. So you've got rid of those as well. So what's being retained that needs regional connectivity? You don't need Sheffield Hull, Thomas is pointing out. So Sheffield Hull, it's the sort of situation where I'm getting horrible. These earphones are probably going on the piss because I'm now getting ringing feedback in my ear. I'm so sorry. Everyone audio only, you don't care. You're not hearing any of this. It all sounds nice to you. Anyway, Sheffield to York via Pontefract, Bag Hill, lol. Yeah, that goes. That's gone. Because you just get, if you're getting that train, you get HS2 from York to Sheffield, to Meadowhall, you know. No, my view is that there is very little that you retain. Sheffield Hull is the sort of thing that I think Hull needs to have very decent connectivity to Doncaster, much improved connectivity straight to Doncaster and down to London that way. I think it's a good, if you've got your all-stopping fast services running from on the East Coast Main Line, then better, really greatly improving the Hull route is one thing. So what you do if you're wanting to go to Hull is actually you then change at Doncaster. Is the way you do it. So you'd be on the metro service to Doncaster. So again, what's left of regional services? I don't think many are, and I think that's the right thing to do, actually. Yeah, that's my view. Let's see, Sheffield Lincoln. So yeah, those are the ones that are following Great Central, and I would say that you have the change at Worksop. So you have high frequency services that get you out to Worksop, and then you hop on a regional service that terminates at Worksop that takes you then out. That's my preference would be, because by doing this you're simplifying the existing infrastructure. You're allowing you can devolve that infrastructure in its entirety if needs be to the commanding authority. That is my view. The command authority boundaries are an arbitrary way to plan a network, but they, and to be honest, I've breached those boundaries in some places and I've stayed away from them in others to kind of make it work operationally. So there's always a bit of compromise, but the point is that you then ensure that the adjacent networks work as well, so that it works. Why Worksop and not Retford? It's a good question. My view was that Worksop provided a neat three-way connection for the Robin Hood line and for stuff going the other way. And also you've got the space at Worksop to do turn back, which you don't at Retford, because Retford is kind of a two-platform through station with very little that you can do because it's in a hole, because it's buried under the, it's been driven under the East Coast Main Line. So that was my view. Obviously, there are other, if you did go to Retford, you could do things like connect into the East Coast Main Line. But there's not much going on the East Coast Main Line for people in South Yorkshire at that point, because actually you want to go to Meadowhall if you're doing anything on the East Coast Main Line, other than going to Lincoln. So that's my logic to it. That is my general logic to why I would do that. Is it gives you some of that. It gives you that segregation of service. I'm not suggesting this is perfect, but operationally, all the operational nerds, I hope you're seeing why I'm doing some of these things and why there's a logic to it. So, our Valleys line, where were we? We were going down. So Barnsley Interchange, right? So Barnsley Interchange, new station at Stairfoot, so in south of Barnsley. Wombwell, Elscar, stations that exist. For a while, I was like, oh, we need a station here to interchange the motorway, and I was like, oh no, it's in a tunnel. No, forget that. Never mind. So always look at your geography. This is where I was doing those 2 kilometer radius curves. I was like, oh, perfect spot for a station. And I went, no, it's in a hole. It's in a hole. So no, forget that idea. Anyway, so Chapelton or Chapeltown, I'm not sure. Leeds is Chapeltown, is Chapelton. Or is it Chapeltown? Oh, whose Chapeltown is Chapeltown? Whose Chapeltown is Chapelton? Make your minds up. New station at Grange Lane. Good spot for it. Large lump of population here that would feed into that, as well as connections potentially onto, there's lots of useful connectivity there as well, opportunities there, and you get nice views of HS2 and the Trans-Pennine, the South Pennine high-speed connection as well, which would be nice. And then you whiz along and you arrive into Meadowhall Interchange. You run through this dense core, so you're running through the dense core all the way down to Dorn and Totley, at which point you peel off. Well, in fact, you've already peeled off. You run through Dorn and Totley as a 4-platform station, escape the commanding authority, run into Grindleford, Hathersage, Bamford, and then up to Hope. And then Hope, which is funny because it's a nowhere station, you turn it into a turn back for those services, but you could probably, with the frequency that we're talking about, you could probably achieve that on a 2-track with a crossover rather than building additional platform capacity. Why am I doing that? Well, it's because people do commute from these, and it also because by connecting them into the metro system, you're doing something pretty positive for the economies of these villages as well. That's my view. It doesn't have to be the way we do that. It could be that we don't have this branch at all, and that we just have it running in and terminating in Sheffield Midland, and that's the way you do it. And maybe at the start, that's exactly what you do. But I think I see that as being a valuable and useful way to run that service. Again, because you could then come the other direction and finish at Hope from Greater Manchester, so you can have that connection at Hope. Hope feels like the right place to put it rather than further in the other direction, but people might have other thoughts on that. Basically, but if you go any further the other way, you end up in the urban core, like Furness Vale and such. So, yeah, that's my thoughts. So, yeah, it's a good point actually. I think was it Edale that had the. Should we turn off our stations briefly and have a look at which stations had an island? No, it isn't. I think it is Edale, which is further up. Where's Edale? Edale is up here. No. Definitely one of the stations had a... Yeah, there it is. There's an island platform. It was lovely. And a big one at that. Is that where you go into the middle? No, I don't think so. I think it's too close to Greater Manchester. I think we've already breached the walls significantly by this point, as it were. So that's... And I've nominally shown some frequencies here. It's 2111, and I don't want this to run too much longer, but partly for recording and other thing reasons. So that's why. Bear with me. But that's it. That's where I got to. That's where I that's the logic of what I developed and what I think. So, Katie Fenn, my MP, Clive Betts, is dead set on using tram trains for the Don Valley Barrow Hill line. Do you think politicians can be convinced to use Stad the Metro BR 777 variant? So this comes after Eastern High Speed. Are there any parts you could do before? So, yeah, the point of this, the logic of this is that there's so much that you could do now. Firstly, rebranding trains to be South Yorkshire and kind of fiddling with timetables, even just rejudging existing timetables to kind of more closely replicate this. There are probably 100 steps that you could rationally lay out between now and a finished super system. Luft is saying this would significantly harm Peterborough. I don't agree. Unless you're referring to HS2, that's kind of another discussion. And Peterborough, probably what happens to Peterborough after HS2 is a good episode. But I don't see how this harms Peterborough. Yeah, I don't. Feel free to elaborate on that, Luft, but I don't see how this would impact on Peterborough. Yeah, the 777s they've just had some teething problems, Gareth. It's not that they're not totally wonderful. It's just they've had some introductory teething problems, as a few of the Stadlers have. They're very good trains. But no, people should care about Peterborough, not least because the centre of Peterborough, the railway centre of Peterborough is like a ridiculous model railway. It's like everything, every layer, every bit of bridge, every bit of train service you can see going in all directions, heritage lines, all sorts. It's like it's been set up to be a model railway. It's great. So this is so this is kind of, and if you have ideas for your local area, do share them. It's not that I'll have you on and talk about it, because I always wanted to pass it through the filter of what I think with my view of the strategic and the tactical and the operational that of what the picture is. But I do suggest areas that you want me to do next. There are others that I will do. Brum is certainly on the list of coming up soon. But Brum's interesting because it does have very good suburban rail already, and it's like, well, what do you do next, and how does that look, and what are the scope limitations, and for a massive urban area. So lots of Barnsley to Doncaster only served by one bus now, and the former rail route goes straight through Manvers Trading Estate. So, for example, if you're going Barnsley, the fun thing about this is, firstly, frequencies are really important. 3 trains per hour along here isn't great. It's a lot better than the current state, but it's not. You could increase all these by one train. That's kind of tempering, because you'd end up running a pretty intensive core through here. But actually, you could step things up. You could rebalance. Again, it's only indicative. It's an indicative first pass. If you're going from Barnsley to Doncaster, say, so you're getting 4 trains an hour. So within a quarter of an hour, you're getting a train down to Meadowhall, and then within another 5 minutes, you're getting the train up to up kind of in the direction of, and then another 5-10 minutes, you're getting up to Doncaster. So changing isn't a big deal if you've got a really high frequency service. This is the really important thing. Peterborough, we'll talk about the Peterborough thing another time because it's an interesting challenge. But I do want to do West Country. I want to do Exeter actually, because Exeter would be small, but Exeter is a seriously fast growing suburban area. Like it's growing at pace significantly. But also, Bristol Bath is obviously an interesting one as well to see what that could and should look like. North Devon's kind of yes to North Devon, but it's kind of its own thing. Nooker, chuck them in the Discord in the plans, and feel free to add me into your extra thoughts. So that's that. Let me minimize that and bring us back to our overall map. Costs. What are the costs? Well, once you reach the end, the capex of this is probably about 3 billion quid. So that's full electrification. That's track relay. In fact, let's get my little spreadsheet up. That's total electrification, which costs you about 700 million quid. All the new stations, you're probably looking about 800 million quid. So obviously that's incremental. Like, you don't have to do any of those to start with. You can even never do some of them, but that's putting that money in the bag. Upgrading existing stations for full accessibility, etc. Assumed about 500,000 quid for that. So a complete renewal of track and signalling. Why have I done 2 spaces there? How actually bizarre. Complete renewal of track and total resignaling. I've put in about 700 million for a total resignaling with sort of ETCS system, and then half a billion quid for the new train fleet and a depot somewhere. That might increase. That might be more like 700 or 800 million, depending on the frequencies and how you'd service them. But that's based on scaling up from the 777 fleet. So the total cost of this 3.2 billion quid in today's penny. Now, what does that mean? Well, if you follow my £5,000 per head rule, then it means that the South Yorkshire Combined Authority is owed about 9 billion quid. So even if you spend this money, then you've still got 5 billion quid left over to spend on the high-speed link across to Manchester. So the money should be there. So don't be afraid by 3 billion quid as a cost. And it's not all happening at once. 3 billion quid being spent over a decade or two is pretty decent. So we're not talking about enormous amounts of money. It's just that it looks scary because you put all the lines on a map and people get very upset, like Treasury will get very upset. Another thing I want to say, how does this relate to today's plan? So when I wrote this article, some of the comments, 3 billion quid could be paid for with a 5p fuel duty raise. Yeah, so I was saying the fuel duty raise has cost 3 billion quid in this last budget. So 3 billion quid is nothing. It's just nothing. The other secret cost of this is HS2. Jamie, you're absolutely right, yes. But this is why you have to think strategically on this stuff. This is what HS2 unlocks. You couldn't do this without HS2. You just simply cannot do this without HS2. All the stuff we talked about that regional connectivity relies on the HS2 giving you the hub and spoke model to make all this work. And that's why I'm doing these two maps together, the high-speed map and this map, because they're very interesting to run next to each other. So let me how does this relate to today's plans? Yeah, so it relates to today's plans because a few of the comments in the article got a bit angry with me because they're like, well, you're saying this, you're going to distract from them and maybe people get upset and might not push forward on current plans. Like, firstly, I don't think that'll happen because these are much further ahead. It's not like I'm HS UK putting forward an alternative to HS2. These are like clearly long-term aspirational plans, right? They don't bear any comparison to any of the frankly trivial and pathetic plans that are currently in the works. But these should not preclude any of the current plans, really. Ideally, anything that's currently being planned should be being shaped in a way that is part of this bigger picture. Of course it isn't, because everyone at local authority level, there is no funding devolution, everyone at local authority level is afraid to suggest to Treasury they might want to spend some more money in the future. The current plans, as far as I'm concerned, are kind of barely anything. It's like sellotaping a line of 5p's to the side of the train. It's not. I'm sure there's some fantastic little plans, but they just don't represent anything of the aspiration that somewhere like the South Yorkshire and Sheffield as a city deserves. As I just said, 1.5 million people. That's what we're talking about here. So my view is that you need to have the big picture. You should have the big picture, and then no matter what you do, you can start doing some very small stuff. You can do station openings. You can do bits of electrification. You can replace trains. You can wiggle around timetables. You can rebrand trains and have dedicated trains running on lines. all that stuff can happen. You can have dedicated, station branding and South Yorkshire, sort of a South Yorkshire brand for the buses and the trains and the trams. You can do all that stuff quite quickly before you do any major heavy realignments. Oh, very quickly, there is a little bit of new infrastructure, if I recall, which is doing some actual work down. There is a little, it's not new, but it's some double tracking stuff, for example, down here to connect off from the current kind of cross-country route coming out of Sheffield and then whizzing down what is Pants and actually reprioritising that as the main through route down to, certainly for the passenger stuff, down into Rotherham Central. So that's like the only bit of... And then, obviously the upgrade work on what is currently just a single track branch line again. So there are areas where you're putting in 2 tracks where there's currently 1 track. There's nothing completely new, I think, that I'm referring to here. Let me just remind. I don't think there's anything that's actual brand new infrastructure. So it's we're talking about, this isn't bonkers. This isn't like drive a completely new subway tunnel. This is using existing infrastructure, because I think with the valley shape of the population spread, which let's remind ourselves by sliding these on, we do capture a decent whack of it. We do capture a decent whack of that population, notable exception being the top end of Barnsley, but we talked a little bit about, Thomas rightly called that out. We talked a bit about this. The tram trains aren't going to be on these lines anymore. The tram trains leave these lines. That's really key. So these lines would not have tram trains on. The tram trains would be put back on the roads to be trams. So that is what I think that should look like. Everyone, I've really enjoyed that. That's been good fun. I hope it's been something. It's been a good big face. Yeah, I've enjoyed that. That was good fun. We haven't done one of these for quite a while, actually. JB Potts, I don't think you need grade separated junctions for any of this. No, you could run it all flat because the frequencies and you just do double junctions, and then the switching times are short. Trains interlace. Happy days. No problems. Don't need any grade separation. I don't think. It's beautiful. Would a central line branch between Deepcar and Penistone be useful? Maybe. Get sketching of that on the Discord and see what that might think. Do make your suggestions. There's plenty for you to screenshot in there. Make your suggestions for what you think about that and where you think there might be potential for change. In the meantime, I pressed the wrong thing. Sorry, everyone. I'm here still. I'm here. Oh, goodness. How long did that... I'll have to edit that out in the audio. Sorry, I'm here. Sorry. Everyone in the YouTube, hi, you're getting this fun, which I will cut out when I have to... Look at that. Right, so look, I'm going to say the thing that the clever podcasters say, and I'm going to say that again. Oh, dear. So, the audio-only people, thank you so much for listening. I hope that worked okay. I'm laughing because of the shenanigans that have just been edited out of what you're listening to. I hope that worked. Lots of maps, lovely stuff. The usual plugs, GarethDennis.co.uk/merch for the merchandise. Will be what it's going to be. We've got there's all sorts of stuff on there. Suggestions for new stuff, potential new stuff. Yes, Hannah will chat. GarethDennis.co.uk/merch. GarethDennis.co.uk/Discord for the chat to continue ad infinitum. Glorious, marvellous. PayPal.me/GarethDennis for loose change and abuse. Thank you to those of you who've chucked that sort of thing at me. And Patreon.com/GarethDennis for the Patreon supporters, of which you're all wonderful. It was so nice to have a group of you join me for the book launch last night. It was absolutely lovely. Thanks so much to those of you who came out. I will be doing more fun stuff like that, even if it's like just a patron-only pub session somewhere after I've done a thing. But note that the next... in fact, I'll save that for the next thing. So, this. Like a missed train, the moment has passed.
The point at which we could avoid a future that requires us to completely rethink how our society functions has come and gone. We can no longer tinker around the edges of our society to keep it viable. Humanity needs to embrace massive change on a scale we've not yet truly conceived of. And this change will touch every aspect of the way we live our lives. After food, shelter, safety, and well-being, movement is one of humanity's basic needs. And the way we currently facilitate that movement has fueled the biggest threat to our species. Global warming, global heating, climate change, whatever you call it, it is the greatest existential crisis facing humanity. It is no longer possible to avoid its consequences. We can only do our best to minimize those consequences and their impact on society.
Yes, the audiobook. It's available. Patreon people, you will be getting a cheeky little bonus. But to everyone else, you can buy the audiobook as well as the actual book. It'd be a delight for you to do so. I did it quite quickly, but very well apparently. So we've got a lovely bit of audiobook action for you to listen to the full thing, unabridged, for you to enjoy to your heart's content. And yes, I will be updating the cover art because someone's created this, and it's an interesting adaptation of the front cover of the book. Yes, I'll be fixing that. Don't worry. Anyway. Yeah, I put me and the producer put some serious work in to get the audiobook done. Is that my voice? I sound so different. I was ill, but also very carefully and beautifully produced. So it's very relaxing, I'm sure. Anyway, it's available now. You can get it. And yes. So, also WTYP. I'm about to record another episode tonight, in fact. But there's an episode in the works that'll be popping out soon. I'm sure I am a co-host of Well, There's Your Problem podcast temporarily, and it's very cool that I am, and I love it, and I look forward to the next episode landing. They are good fun. I love seeing some of you over there. The next episode, oh, no, not the next episode. I need to show you my face first before I talk about the next episode. Next week, Wednesday night, Houseman's Bookshop in London. Tickets are very limited because it's very small, but if you're able to come down, then do so. It'd be lovely to see somebody there. It's going to be the first public event for the book, which would be nice. It's going to be a nice Q&A with Billy, which will be very cool. I very much look forward to that. That'll be really cool. And then Q&A. It'll be a nice public Q&A, nice chat about the book. So yeah, that'll be fun. In Houseman's near King's Cross. It's a fab little bookshop. The first place that had on the day of the book launch, Houseman's had it. They had it on shelves prominently as well, next to Judith Butler, which is really cool. So yeah, staggering, baffling. Anyway, get rid of my face. Episode 239 next week. Who's in the chat? And what's this about next week? Episode 239, Vancouver SkyTrain. So simultaneously with me doing that event will be a rail natter that will have already been recorded. It's the RM Transit episode, except it isn't, because we've got one better than RM Transit, actually. I'm very excited about the guest that we'll be having for episode 239, Vancouver SkyTrain, and what we can learn from it. It's going to be fun. I'm excited. Very, very excited. So, that's nearly an hour and a half. Right, enough of that. So many things to talk about. But I will speak to you all for a live one in a couple of weeks. But there's a pre-record for next week. But if not, I'll see some of you at Houseman's in a week's time. Keep buying the book. Keep telling people to buy the book. Tell everyone to buy the book, because it's good. And the more people, if you order it into bookshops like Waterstones and stuff, which you can now do, they will go, "Ooh, people are really buying this, aren't they?" So the best thing you can do now is actually go into bookshops and order loads of the books, because now then Waterstones and other things will start stocking it, and they might even put it on their little tables at the front. Because what I really want is to see my book at those front tables with the non-fiction books at the front. That's what I really want to see. Come on, we can do it. Anyway, I'm waving. Everyone, enough of my ridiculous waffling. It's been a joy. It's been a pleasure. That was a fun episode. Let's do that again sometime soon. Cheerio!